Iranian coins or Vietnamese coins, but nobody's going to want them when you want to get out of them. Our business is very much a two-way street with a lot of buying and selling on the part of us as dealers. The next thing that I want to mention is really about price, because price in so many industries is very, very hard to determine. I talked to a friend about 3 or 4 years ago who bought his very first new car, and the car was great and he loved it, but he was just an emotional wreck after buying his car. And I really couldn't figure out why. He loved the car, and we talked for a little while, and he explained to me it was the price, really. It boiled down to the price. And I asked him why, and he said, well, when you see that ad and it has the price for $30,000 for that car, he said, well, I realized after I went into the dealership, I got up close to those numbers, and it said starting at in really small print. And, I walked out of there spending $15,000 more for that car than I thought I was going to. And he just had the worst case of buyer's remorse that probably went on for 2 or 3 months. And it was because he didn't understand the pricing. And he ended up with a lot of things that he really didn't want. And he was paying for things that he didn't even know were in the vehicle. And like I said, he didn't want and didn't need. 2 months later, he found out there was this $700 low jack thing underneath the dash that he didn't know about. And gold and silver investing can be similar to that. And that's why I want to start with pricing. And I want you to understand a few terms that will help you avoid traps where you pay way too much for things that you really don't need. The first term that you need to know is spot price. The spot price is the price that you see for gold and silver running across a ticker at the top of a website, or that you see nowadays if you read the newspaper in the newspaper. Used to, I don't know if y'all ever remember that movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, when they're trading all those stocks and waving all those pieces of paper around, and those guys were theoretically buying things from one another, commodities from one another, and going to take delivery on the spot for that. That's where the term spot price comes from. And if you know what the spot price is, that's the basis price for anything you're going to buy and sell in physical precious metals. You will buy above that as a retail customer, and typically you will sell below that. The difference between those two, as I said before, is about 7 to 10%. But you still have to, even if you know what the spot price is and understand what it is, you still have to know if you're getting a fair price. And the way that you do that is understanding another term called premium. Premium is the markup that you as a retail customer pay above the spot price when you buy gold and silver coins. And the premium consists of the wholesaler's markup and the retailer's markup. Without getting too deep into premium and the calculations for it, if you just divide what you pay per ounce by the spot price, you'll know what the premium, which is shown, which you can figure out in a percentage, is. Typically, as a good rule of thumb, you really don't want to pay any more than 6% for either gold or silver. There are exceptions to that rule, and there are many instances, especially today, where you can buy gold and silver that is very liquid and divisible well under that, around 2 or 3%. And I think it bears mentioning the exceptions that we have seen have taken place, and we spoke about these a little bit last year when we were here, between 2020 and 2023, really beginning with the lead up to Biden's inauguration and ending probably about maybe May or June of last year, about 2 or 3 months after Silicon Valley Bank went down. There were numerous instances in that 3-year period that created these kind of buying panics in our industry. And we saw premiums on items that were normally 3% for you to buy as a retail customer over spot, as high as 55% over spot. Wow. And that also went hand in hand with a lot of delivery delays too. The gold and silver industry is much, much smaller than most people think. So what do you buy? If you're new to gold and silver, what is it that you should buy? Which one, how much of each one, what form? We like to talk about silver first because we favor silver over gold. And typically what we're going to tell you is that you want to put, or we would suggest that you put somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of what you buy in silver, and the balance of that is into gold. The short answer that we recommend that is because we believe silver and gold are in a primary long-term uptrend that probably has about 5 or 10 years left to run. And I think that when we look at everything, all the prices at the end of this market, we'll turn around and say, yeah, silver about quadrupled gold's performance. The reason that we say that is because if you look at silver and gold's price relationship through all of human history, their price relationship very nearly mirrored their actual relationship in the ground. And their relationship in the ground is about 12 to 16 ounces of silver to every 1 ounce of gold. Silver was demonetized in this country in 1873, and because when that separation began, a separation in their price began. And we've seen that ratio as high as 124 to 1, I believe, about 3 years ago. But the good news is every time gold and silver reach a top in a long-term uptrend, they return to that historic ratio. So they return to somewhere around 12 or 16 ounces of silver buys 1 ounce of gold. The ratio today or yesterday, the last time I looked, was around 90 to 1. So you can imagine, for us to get down to that ratio again, silver has to greatly outperform gold. The types of silver that we recommend are coins first, primarily, unless you are putting your IRA into a depository. We're going to recommend coins to you first. And we like silver rounds and 90% silver coin. Silver rounds are simply 1 ounce silver coins that are privately minted in this country by a large number of refineries. They come with various pictures on the front and the back, and they state their weight, which is 1 ounce, and their purity, which is 99.9% pure on their face. They'll have a picture on the front and the back. The most popular design today mimics an old buffalo nickel, if you remember what a buffalo nickel looks like. The other form of silver that we recommend is 90% silver coin. Some people call this junk silver. This isn't trash silver, it's junk silver. And that's just old quarters and dimes for the sake of this conversation, old quarters and dimes minted before 1965. These included, when they were minted, half dollars also, but half dollars generally carry a slightly higher price nowadays. So when we recommend 90% silver, we're talking about quarters and dimes. We recommend it typically because it is the least expensive, most divisible, and most liquid form of silver that you can buy. This year, we have seen, since the beginning of the year, a lot of retail selling into the gold and silver market. That has driven wholesale premiums down quite a bit. So everything is cheap now. Silver rounds are cheap. 90% silver is cheap. You can really, Friday when I left the office, you could buy them both for the same price as a retail customer. The only catch with 90% silver is it may be the most complicated item in gold and silver. Because whereas when you have a 1 ounce gold American Eagle or you have a silver round, you're buying one item. It's just one thing. With 90% silver coin, you're buying a lot. And that lot is referred to, we call it a face value dollar. For all intents and purposes, it's nothing more than a dollar and change. When we say a face value dollar, we're talking about $1 in quarters, $1 in dimes, 2 half dollars, or any combination thereof. And the reason it's sold that way is because it's an odd weight in ounces. And 3 denominations were minted, and $1 is the common denominator in those 3 denominations. So that's how it's bought, and that's how it's sold. A lot of folks call us nowadays new to gold and silver and have heard the catchphrase sovereign silver. They've got to have sovereign silver. And I have learned from my customers that sovereign silver just means silver minted by the government somewhere. And the United States government, of course, mints silver American Eagles. Those are anything with the word American on it is the name brand in this country. And you're going to pay more for the name brand in gold and silver just like you will in clothes or watches or anything else. If you want to buy sovereign silver, if your heart is set on it, buy sovereign silver, because when you come into gold and silver, you really need to get something that you're comfortable with. Our recommendations are just recommendations, but at the end of the day, you got to sleep with your purchasing decision. So if you want to buy sovereign silver, though, you can save money and buy foreign coins like Britannias from England, Philharmonics from Austria, Kangaroos from Australia, and save yourself that added markup that you're paying because something has the word American on it, even though it's the exact same as every other 1 ounce piece of silver, including a silver round that you might buy. While we're on the subject of silver, something that also bears mentioning is the difference in weight and volume between gold and silver. A couple of weeks ago, for some reason, we picked the number $800,000. And that's a lot of gold and silver. But we wanted to know, how much does $800,000 worth of silver weigh versus $800,000 worth of gold? $800,000 worth of silver will weigh over a ton, and the volume would take up a pallet, I have no doubt. The weight of $800,000 in gold is 27 pounds. We could all walk out of the room with that. So if we bring that down to a more realistic budget for most of us, if we're talking about $10,000 in gold or silver, $10,000 in gold you're easily going to be able to hold in one hand. $10,000 in silver is going to weigh about 25 pounds, and its volume is going to be somewhere around, say, a lady's shoebox that she bought a pair of summer sandals in. It's a fairly small box that would not take up a whole lot in any safe, regardless of the size. In precious metals also, typically the rule of thumb is when you're buying gold and silver coins and bars, the larger the item, the less you pay per ounce. As you get smaller, typically, the more you pay per ounce, right? Because it costs a mint more to strike the same number of ounces in a tenth of an ounce than it does for them to strike the same number of ounces in 1 ounce. What we like is when you can buy small items, very divisible items in gold and silver, and pay the same price or less than you would if you're buying a 1 ounce item. So that's why 90% silver is very, very attractive to us. In gold, I think the first thing to know about gold is a little bit of history. In the late 1960s, South Africa basically broke a mold. And I don't know why nobody in the history of the world had ever thought of doing what they did. They introduced the Krugerrand gold coin series, and they minted a 1 ounce, a half ounce, a quarter ounce, and a tenth of an ounce coin. Nobody had ever thought of doing this for some reason. When they did that, the light bulb went off around the world and everybody copied them. It took the United States until 1986 to begin doing it, but everybody from China to Canada to Australia to the United States to Great Britain mints this series, this 1 ounce, half, quarter, and tenth of an ounce gold coin series today, and it's called a modern issue gold coin series. And a modern issue gold coin series is the new and shiny car on the lot. They put a new one out every year. A lot of countries change the designs. They do a lot of unnecessary things with the designs that really arguably aren't even that attractive. How many platypus gold coins do we really need in the world? But they're there nonetheless. And my point in bringing this up is these are the heavily marketed items, and they're very well known and they're very liquid, but they're not necessarily the best buy always in gold. Before South Africa started minting the Krugerrand series, everybody in the world had already been minting gold for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years to regionally and historically relevant weights, and a lot of those coins are still around. As a matter of fact, some countries still mint restrikes of those coins because they're still so popular. Those coins are often fractional gold coins, and remember what I said about getting something smaller for the price of something larger. This is a win for us because you're getting more divisibility for the same price per ounce in coins like these. And these are coins like the British sovereign, the French 20 franc, the Austrian 100 krona would be a large one version of these, and the U.S. $5 or $10 commemorative. If you reach back in your mind to high school history class, you may remember the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, the British sovereign was a proto-dollar. It was all over the world. it was so popular all over the world that a number of countries copied it and minted coins in the same size, this just under a quarter of an ounce, 0.2354 of an ounce size. Likewise, in the 19th century, a lot of European countries banded together and made a proto-euro. And just like they started the euro in the late 20th century, they started the Latin Monetary Union in the late 19th century, and they started minting these 20 franc gold coins. And you had France and Belgium and Austria and Italy and Greece and Switzerland all minting this 20 franc gold coin. Well, this is a very, very well-known, widespread gold coin that's very liquid, that you could sell to any dealer in the country when you want to get rid of it. It's very small. It's under 0.2 of an ounce. Likewise, in the mid-1980s, when the U.S. started making American Eagles, they started minting this. They minted this modern commemorative series called the $5 and $10 commemorative. These are a dual commemorative coin. They mimic the old $5 and $10 gold pieces minted in the late 19th and early 20th century. They're the same in their weight and their purity, but they've got some interesting design on their face that the U.S. Mint thought was important. Maybe it's the Olympics. Maybe it's the Statue of Liberty. Maybe it's the first time the First Lady shaved. You know, it's something that they thought was important that they put on this coin. But the point is, it's a very, very inexpensive, very, very liquid way to buy small gold. The next thing that I want to mention is storage. If you buy physical gold and silver, you're responsible for everything. You gotta figure out how to keep it safe. You got to keep it safe from thieves, and you got to keep it safe from fire. And the easiest option for a lot of people, especially if they're putting an IRA into precious metals, is to put it in a depository. And you can do that for what I would argue is not a large fee every year. The problem is that there are not many depositories in the country.
One for you.
And
What did you pay for?
I don't know how easy it would be to get to it if you needed it. So we typically recommend, I want to mention one other thing before I move on from depositories. They're a non-bank entity. A depository is a non-bank entity. So whereas if you take gold and silver and you put it in a safety deposit box, legally that bank can take what you have in that safety deposit box to stay afloat if they need to. That's not the case with a depository. There's a legal difference between the two. If you decide to store the metals yourself, as I mentioned, you have to think about fire and theft. A lot of folks go immediately to the safe, and that has led us to learn maybe more than we need to know about safes, but there's a lot to know. And you know, just like anything else, the amount of money that you would spend on protecting your gold and silver needs to be proportional to the amount of money that you put into gold and silver. The top of the line safes are going to be rated TL15 or TL30 safes, and this is something that someone with a torch saw in their hands could not get through one hinge of in an 8-hour period. This is something that a 2 to 3 foot little safe weighs 900 pounds. This is big time. You know, I don't even know what a torch saw is, but it would be. I imagine it'd be tough to run one for 8 hours even. The problem is that, you know, for that kind of security, you're going to spend a lot of money. You're talking probably $4,000 to $5,000 for a safe like that. And if you're spending $10,000 in precious metals or $5,000, it doesn't make any sense to spend that on a safe. So there are other options out there. Liberty makes a cheap safe. A large number of companies make decent safes that are small, that are under $1,000. Liberty makes one that's called a home safe. It's got an hour fire rating on it. That's, like I said, about 2 foot by 3 foot. That won't cave your floor in if you have to put it on stick and frame construction. You know, and obviously also won't break your budget, but will give you the same fire rating as a more expensive safe. If you're seriously considering a safe, I would rather have something with a manual lock than an electronic lock, because if there is a fire, I can get into the safe. I don't have to wait for somebody from a company to come and open my things and see how melted they really are. That size safe, about a 2 to 3 foot safe, will hold more silver and gold than you would think. That size safe will you can probably get about 8,000 ounces of silver in a safe that size. And just off the top of my head, let's call 8,000 ounces of silver, about $240,000 in value. So maybe you opt for the more expensive safe if that's what you're cramming in there. But there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room in something that small, and you really don't have to go to Bass Pro Shops and get the biggest safe that their dolly will carry to find something that'll work for you. And I would never rule out fireproof boxes. One of the things that we typically tell our customers is, look, if you go safe shopping, go to Home Depot and buy a fireproof box too. These are just one of these little fat suitcases that have got a 30-minute rating and normally just have a key that you open them with. And if you can't spend the money on a safe or don't want to spend the money on a safe, buy 2 of them. And take one of them and put it in your house somewhere where it's, not too hard to find. And put, a few $100s worth of valuables in it and don't lock it. Close it, but don't lock it. In the hopes that if somebody does break into your house, they find that and they stop looking.
Good idea.
That is a very, very quick introduction to what we do, and a probably an oversimplification in some ways. But I want to also add a couple of things outside just what you need to buy and what you need to know before you buy process, and that is where we think gold and silver are right now, and a little bit about where we think they're heading. Right now, gold and silver are in the middle of really a paradigm shift. And as you may have read before somewhere, a historic revaluation. Typically, gold and silver, especially gold, has moved opposite interest rates and opposite the dollar. That has recently changed. That's no longer happening, and it's largely because huge, powerful, deep pockets in the world have caught on to the dollar. The first of those are the BRICS countries. You may have read about this more than once. They're buying gold hand over fist and have been for a lot longer than many people realize, because they want a politically neutral asset. They've realized that the dollar is a gun pointed in their face, and they're tired of it. And if they're going to switch away from the dollar, they don't want your gun pointed in their face. They want something that is genuinely politically neutral. I really think that this was driven home really to everybody when Russia invaded Ukraine and the United States just took their foreign reserves. I mean, this is a big flag, and people have taken notice. The other central banks, other than the BRICS countries, have been buying gold, about 3 times more gold than U.S. Treasuries over the last 15 years. As I said, this has been going on actually for some time behind the scenes, and you could make a very good argument that this began because of a genuine doubt in the dollar's soundness and a genuine doubt of those in charge of the monetary policies in the United States that were made very, very evident after the 2008 crisis. Then you've got large investment funds following these central banks buying, and the Chinese. Don't forget the Chinese. We've got the Chinese government and the Chinese public buying gold voraciously, and you may have seen or read something about this. Especially this year, there has been a lot of gold, physical gold, in the United States and Western Europe, sold into the wholesale market, melted into bars. and it's flying to China for a 2 to 2.5% premium for those wholesale dealers. I can't stress the importance of this point enough. The West is actively impoverishing itself. And somebody's going to wake up and turn around in 10 or 20 or 50 years and go, where's all the gold gone? And it's probably, unfortunately, going to be our children. Going hand in hand with all this buying is a breakdown of a very, very long-term gold price suppression scheme. You can argue that this has been going on since 1934 with the Gold Reserve Act and the beginning of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And then in 1971, the Treasury closed the gold window and began actively encouraging price suppression. This suppression began with paper gold futures trading in the form of futures and options in 1974. This has been coming to an end. The Basel III Accords put new restrictions on banks in 2019. 2019, I think, that they started having to follow, where they could not carry as much paper gold as they wanted to, and this whole scheme has worked because, and when I say this whole scheme, let me back up and say that the price that you see on the internet of gold and silver is not, as it should be, determined by physical investment demand. It's determined by paper contracts in gold and silver trading. Well, nobody's ever demanded delivery on these contracts, but the Chinese have begun now demanding delivery on these contracts. And so that's sucking. This is just more power to this vacuum, sucking gold and silver, or sucking gold especially, out of the Western world and into the East. If you have questions, specific questions about how you would order gold and silver, how that process works, you can give us a ring anytime. I am from volunteerpreciousmetals.com, and you can email me, justin@volunteerpreciousmetals.com, anytime. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. I'll give them a little more plug here. They have an outstanding FAQ on their website for new people, and also their MAP plan, their
monthly acquisition
plan. Willie's used it, works really well. Helped us kind of get introduced to all this, and it's very, very simple for us. We appreciate that.
Good.
Also, plug to your father, the Money Changer. He has a daily, I don't know how you find the time to do this. His newsletter is outstanding. I'm fortunate to read that, and provides a lot of insight to what's really going on in the markets, not only for precious metal, and good Southern vernacular too, which I like a lot. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ken,
Yes, sir.
they can sign up for free for that at themoneychanger.com.
The Money Changer.
The-moneychanger.
Okay, sign up for free. It's well worth it. Well worth it. Okay, Trey, you ready?
Whatever you guys are.